There was a Baptist church not much different than First Baptist Lakewood. It had a problem one year. It seemed that their church parking lot that was nice and paved now became the local hangout on a Saturday night for the teenage kids. Not the church kids, but just teenage kids. It was a safe place to park, and so over a couple of weeks, when the folks would show up on Sunday morning, they'd find their parking lot littered with trash. You know, Burger King wrappers, McDonald's wrappers, just trash left over by these teenagers. After this went on for a month's time, the church got tired of picking up the trash every Sunday morning before worship, and so they did what every Baptist church would do. They formed a committee to solve the problem of church trash on their parking lot. True story now. Stay with me. The committee was formed to solve this problem. How can they get the trash off their parking lot so when they come to worship on Sunday morning, they don't see all the litter from the night before? Initially the deacons would show up early, clean the trash up, and after a while that got tired, and so the committee met and said, okay, they came up with some brainstorming ideas, presenting these back to the church. One of the ideas they presented back to the church was to simply build a fence around the church, 6-foot-tall chain-link fence, and keep it locked except during normal business hours and during church hours. So that someone would come and lock it before, open it up before church and close it after church. And that way it would be closed and locked on Saturday night. Kids couldn't get on there. They couldn't litter the parking lot. Problem would be solved. So that was one solution the committee came up with. Another solution, pretty innovative solution they came up with, was to install speakers that would project music outside, and then do what some malls have done recently. They start playing classical music on the speakers, and it drives teenagers away. It works. The malls have discovered when they have a problem with teenagers lording in the malls, they turn on classical music, and after a while, the mall clears out. So someone on the committee said, well, maybe we should do that. The malls do it. It works for them. Maybe we should try that. And so they decided not to do that. That might disturb the neighbors as well. And so they came back. They decided, they proposed, let's just build a fence around the church. So they did a business meeting like Baptists do, because we decided, polity together, we all decide. And so they came, they presented the two options to the church. And, both ideas had some positives and negatives. And finally someone spoke up in the back and said, well, I got a bizarre idea. What if we install some basketball goals out on the parking lot? And what if we pay liability insurance, be prepared to pay the increase? Then what if some of the men from the church start showing up on Saturday nights and try to involve these kids in some basketball? And what if we then try to minister to these guys that God has obviously brought to our property? Said the worst could happen is they would just leave because they don't want to be hassled by the church folk on Saturday night. Or the best that might happen is some of these kids might get saved and come to the Lord and get their lives changed. But how can you vote down that plan, right? So the pastor, he was a young pastor, but he was a wise man. And he said, well, that's a great idea, but in the business meeting settings, now how many of you men will start giving up your Saturday nights to come to church and do this? So if I don't have a firm commitment, then we can't do this. It's got to be a lot of us involved in this. It's got to be like a commitment to like Sunday school teaching. You've got to be here. You can't just change your mind at the last minute and not show up. We've got to do this. The church rallied around the idea. They voted to do this, to start this ministry. And so they started reaching out to these teenagers that God had brought to their parking lot. And sure enough, some of the teenagers left. Some of the ladies in the church got involved, and they thought, well, we can maybe attract some of the female teenagers by having some voice lessons. Having some folks from the choir and the praise team kind of do some voice training, and so this idea blossomed to a huge ministry. And before long, Saturday night was a happening place on the church parking lot and in the choir room, because the teenage girls really were interested in singing. They heard, and so this ministry blossomed. Well, as a process, this young man named Slim was a rough street kid. He worked for a local gang leader, and Slim was a runner for the gang leader. Slim himself didn't use drugs, but his job was to take the drugs from the gang leader, take them out to the dealers, and then collect the money from the dealers and take the money back and give it to the gang leader. That's all Slim's job was. He didn't take the drugs. He didn't sell the drugs, but he was the runner. He was the communication guy. And Slim was making really good money. But Slim liked basketball too. And he got involved in the Saturday night basketball program. And every Saturday night, as the basketball game would progress, they would take a halftime break, and the pastor or one of the other men would take a 5-minute sermon and gear it toward these kids. And in the voice lessons, the ladies would take a break, and for 5 minutes, they'd do a sermon. Just a short testimonial to the power of Jesus Christ in our lives. Well, after hearing these sermons over a period of months, Slim, one Saturday night, as the games were over, Slim came up to the pastor and said, "Hey, pastor, I've been playing ball for a while here. I've heard a lot of your little sermons. So I really am ready to really make a commitment to the Lord." So that night on the parking lot, he and the pastor knelt down, and Slim prayed to turn his life over to Christ, to allow Jesus to come into his life and to clean his life up. The next Sunday morning, Slim was at church. Shocked some of the church kids, but Slim showed up. Rough kid, street kid, but he showed up to church. At the invitation time, Slim walked down the aisle, took the pastor's hand, and said, "Pastor, I want to make it public. I want to stand for Christ in my community." So here's this rough street kid, accepts the Lord, gets baptized that Sunday night in the evening service, that very same Sunday, and he goes on with his life. That Sunday night as he leaves the church, so he tells the pastor, "I need you to pray for me because I have to now go to my gang leader." His name was Rufus. "I got to go to Rufus, and I got to tell him I'm quitting the gang." He said, "Now, Pastor, not many people can just quit a gang. And some of you know what I'm talking about." He said, "They just don't let you quit. So, but I feel God's laid this on my heart. I got to get out of this stuff, and I need to. This is the first step. So pray for me." And Slim said, "But Pastor, I'll be here Wednesday night. I'll tell you how it went." So the pastor was praying that week. Wednesday night came. He was anxious to hear from Slim. Slim didn't show up. He wasn't too worried about it, and said, "Well, I'll catch him Saturday night at the basketball games." Saturday night came, and Slim didn't show up. The pastor began asking to the other kids who were there for the games, "Have you seen Slim?" They said, "No, we haven't seen him for several days now." And no one seemed to be really worried, but he just kind of been gone for a couple of days. Well, about halfway through the games that night, this car pulls into the church parking lot. The car has tinted windows. You can't see inside of it. All the kids knew whose car it was. It was the gang leader's car. Pulls in the parking lot and deliberately drives about 2 miles an hour and drives around the perimeter of the parking lot. The kids stop, sort of in terror, because here's the gang leader here. They just sort of watch his car drive around, slowly all the way around the parking lot. And then finally it's going to pull back on the street. But right before it pulls out on the street, it stops. The back door opens a little bit. Lights don't come on, so no one can see who's in the car. And they notice this bundle get pushed out onto the parking lot. The car door closes very slowly. And again, about 2 miles an hour, the car just drives away. As the car is out of sight, then everyone rushes over to see what this bundle is on their parking lot. And quickly they begin to realize as they unwrap this bundle that it's a body. And there they find the body of Slim. He'd been murdered a couple of days prior by the way the body was. Now on his body was a note scrawled in what looked like blood, and it was attached to Slim's chest with a knife. And the note said, "This is what Jesus did for Slim." It was a message from the gang leader to all of the kids on that basketball court not to mess with Jesus. Well, the young pastor, as he looked into the face of this brand new convert, his heart just broke. And he knelt over Slim and just started crying like a baby, as did the rest of the group there. It was a horrible, traumatic experience. As it turns out, the gang leader reported his car stolen that morning. No one ever saw him, and so no one was ever arrested for the crime. But that night, that young pastor went home after talking with his wife. He called his dad up. His dad was also a pastor. He said, "Dad, I got to tell you something that's happened in my life tonight." And he relayed the story. And then as he was about to hang up, he said, "Dad, I think I finally learned. The church isn't a game." And then they ended their conversation.